The land didn't forgive mistakes. That's what Elias Varnes understood better than most. Better than the men who drank themselves numb at the saloon. Better than the merchants who complained about dust and heat. Better than the sheriff who wore his badge like it meant something beyond the ton it was stamped from. 12 years he'd lived on that patch of stubborn earth 7 miles outside Red Hollow. 12 years of seasons that blurred together, planting, harvesting, surviving. The cabin stood where he and Margaret had built it, log by log, back when hope still felt like something worth holding on to. She'd been gone 9 years now. The grave sat 50 yards from the porch, marked by a simple wooden cross he'd carved himself. No fancy words, just her name and the years. He visited it every morning with coffee, same as he used to when she was alive, sitting on the porch talking about nothing and everything. People in town figured Elias for a hermit, the kind of man broken by loss, hollowed out and going through motions. They weren't entirely wrong, but they weren't right either. Every other Thursday, like clockwork, he rode into Red Hollow. Same route, same time, same stops. General store for supplies, flour, salt, coffee, ammunition. Sometimes fabric, though he wasn't much good with a needle. The blacksmith, if something needed fixing. Never the saloon. Rarely the church. He'd nod at familiar faces. They'd nod back, but their eyes never quite focused on him. It was the look people gave to furniture or fence posts. Acknowledgement without interest. "Morning, Varnes," the store clerk would say, already turning to the next customer. "Supplies," Elias would reply, handing over his list. That was the extent of most conversations. He paid in cash, carried his goods to the wagon himself, and left before the sun hit noon. People appreciated that he didn't linger, didn't ask questions, didn't create complications. The truth was simpler and sadder. They'd stopped seeing him years ago. But Elias saw everything. He noticed when the baker started watering down his flour, when the deputy took up with the seamstress behind her husband's back, when the cattle baron's men started pushing boundaries on disputed land, when the railroad surveyors showed up asking questions nobody wanted to answer. He saw it all, filed it away, and kept his mouth shut. Because talking didn't plant crops, didn't fix broken fences, didn't keep a man alive when winter came hard and early. The rifle helped with that last part. It hung above the fireplace, a Winchester 73, lever action, .4440 caliber. He cleaned it every Sunday night, whether he'd fired it or not. Oil on the barrel, cloth through the chamber, check the action, smooth and certain. Margaret used to tease him about it. "You gonna marry that gun, Elias?" she'd say, laughing while kneading bread dough. "Give it more attention than you give me." "Keeps us fed," he'd reply, not looking up from his work. "So do I, and I don't need oiling." He'd smiled at that. One of the last real smiles he remembered. The rifle had kept them alive through lean winters when game was scarce, and desperations grew teeth. Kept wolves off the livestock. Kept claim jumpers moving when they thought about settling on land that wasn't theirs. After Margaret died, pneumonia, brutal and fast, the rifle became something else. It became the difference between continuing and quitting. There were nights, especially that first year, when Elias sat on the porch with the Winchester across his lap and a bottle beside him, thinking about how easy it would be. One round, simple math, but he never loaded it those nights, because Margaret hadn't raised a quitter, and neither had his father before her. So he'd set the bottle aside, go inside, and sleep a few hours before dawn demanded he start again. People in Red Hollow didn't know any of this. Didn't know about the mornings he woke up unsure why he bothered. Didn't know about the conversations he still had with a grave marker. Didn't know that the quiet farmer who bought flour and said 3 words was actually a man holding himself together with routines and stubbornness. They just knew he showed up, kept to himself, and never caused trouble. That was enough for them. Until September 17th, when everything changed. The day started ordinary. Elias rose before dawn, made coffee, walked out to Margaret's grave with 2 tin cups, set one down by the cross, kept one for himself. "Heading into town today," he said to the weathered wood. "Need nails. Fence on the north pastures coming apart again." The wind moved through the grass. Early autumn, still warm but carrying that edge that said winter was thinking about arriving. "Saw a coyote yesterday," he continued. "Big one. Kept his distance, but he was watching the chickens. Might need to sit up tonight. He drank his coffee slowly, watching the sun break over the eastern hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold that Margaret used to call God's favorite colors. He didn't say that part out loud anymore. After finishing both cups, his own and the one he'd poured for her, he headed back inside, strapped on his gun belt, grabbed his hat, and hitched the wagon. The ride into Red Hollow took 90 minutes at an easy pace. He didn't push the horses, no point wearing them down for errands that could wait an extra 20 minutes. The town came into view just after 8, a collection of buildings trying hard to look permanent in a landscape that ate permanence for breakfast. Two-story structures on Main Street, mostly wood, some brick. The bank stood tallest, 3 stories of optimism built by men who believed Red Hollow would grow into something important. It hadn't. Population held steady around 400. Enough for a post office, a school, 2 saloons, 3 churches competing for the same souls. The railroad had promised a station 5 years back, then changed routes. That killed most of the growth hopes. People stayed anyway. Too stubborn or too broke to leave. Elias tied up outside Jensen's general store, same spot he always used. The street was quiet. A few wagons, some folks heading to work, nothing unusual. Inside, the store smelled like coffee and sawdust. Jensen stood behind the counter, reading a newspaper and looking annoyed. "Varns," he said without looking up. "Need supplies." "List?" Elias handed it over. Jensen scanned it, grunted. "Nails are back ordered. Won't have them till next week." "I'll wait." "Suit yourself." The transaction took 10 minutes. Elias paid, loaded his wagon, and was heading back to the driver's seat when he heard it. Hoofbeats. Fast. 3 riders came down Main Street at a gallop, dust kicking up behind them. They weren't locals. Elias knew every horse in Red Hollow, and these weren't familiar. Big animals, well-fed, expensive saddles. The riders pulled up in front of the bank. Something in the way they moved made Elias pause. Too quick, too purposeful. One of them kept looking around, scanning windows and rooftops. The other 2 dismounted and walked toward the bank entrance. Elias felt it before he understood it, that tightness in his chest that meant trouble was about to announce itself. He was right. The gunshot came from inside the bank. Not loud, muffled by walls, but unmistakable. For 3 seconds, the street froze. Then chaos. A woman screamed. Someone shouted. The bank door flew open and a man stumbled out, clutching his shoulder, blood spreading across his shirt. Deputy Frank Morrison, young guy, maybe 25, eager and decent. He made it 5 steps before his legs gave out. "Everybody stay back," a voice roared from inside the bank. "Anyone comes near, we start killing hostages." The 3rd rider, the one who'd stayed mounted, pulled a shotgun and leveled it at the street. "You heard him! Back off!" People scattered, doors slammed, windows shut. Within 30 seconds, Main Street looked abandoned, except for Deputy Morrison bleeding in the dust and the mounted gunmen watching everything with dead eyes. Elias didn't move. He stood beside his wagon, hand resting on the seat, watching, calculating. The gunman on the horse noticed him. "You, old man! Get inside somewhere before you get hurt!" Elias looked at him, really looked. Saw a kid, maybe 22, trying to sound hard. Saw the way his hand shook slightly on the shotgun. Saw the sweat on his face despite the cool morning. Scared. Amped up. Dangerous because of it. "Moving," Elias said quietly, and stepped toward the alley between the general store and the seamstress shop. The gunman watched him go, then turned his attention back to the street. From the alley, Elias could see the bank's side entrance and part of the back. Could hear voices inside, panicked, pleading. "Please, just take the money. Shut up, everybody on the floor. Hands where I can see them." 7 people inside. Maybe 8. Thursday morning meant payroll deposits from the ranches. Meant more cash than usual. These weren't amateurs stumbling into a robbery. They'd planned this, which meant they'd planned an escape too. Elias moved deeper into the alley, thinking. The smart play was to wait for the sheriff, let the law handle it. Go home, fix his fence, forget this happened. That's what the old Elias would have done. The one from 12 years ago, before Margaret, before the land taught him what survival actually cost. But that Elias was gone. The man standing in the alley now understood something different. Sometimes survival meant acting, meant stepping forward when everyone else stepped back. He'd learned that the hard way, watching Margaret die because the doctor was drunk and the nearest sober one was 2 days' ride away. Learned it watching his crops fail because he'd waited too long to ask for help with irrigation. Learned it in 1,000 small deaths that taught him the same lesson. Waiting didn't save anyone. From inside the bank, "Where's the sheriff? Someone get the damn sheriff." "Ain't no one coming," one of the robbers laughed. "You're on your own." Deputy Morrison groaned in the street, trying to crawl toward cover. The mounted gunman aimed the shotgun at him. "Stay down, boy. Don't make this worse." Elias watched Morrison's face, pale, shocked, hurting. Saw him give up, slump back into the dust. No one was coming. The sheriff's office sat 3 blocks away. Maybe Sheriff Coleman was already organizing a response. Maybe he was drunk. Maybe he was hiding. Didn't matter. By the time help arrived, if it arrived, people would be dead. Elias knew this the way he knew weather patterns and soil quality, knew it in his bones. He looked at his wagon, at the Winchester locked in the case under the driver's seat. Then he looked back at the bank. 7 people. Maybe 8. Margaret's voice in his head. "You gonna do something or you gonna watch?" He'd already decided. The hard part was figuring out how. The layout of Red Hollow worked in his favor. Most frontier towns were built the same, single main street, buildings packed close, alleys running between them like veins. Elias had walked these streets for 12 years, knew every turn, every gap, every rooftop access. The bank backed onto a narrow service alley used for deliveries. 2 windows on the ground floor, both barred. A rear door, solid oak, probably locked from inside. Above that, second-floor windows. No bars. Access to the offices where the bank manager kept records and conducted private business. 3rd floor, storage and unused space. Probably dusty and forgotten. From his position in the side alley, Elias couldn't see the rear clearly, but he knew the building. Had been inside dozens of times over the years, depositing the small amounts he made from selling crops and occasional carpentry work. He needed 3 things: position, timing, and a clear shot. Getting position meant getting high. The building adjacent to the bank, Morrison's Hardware, ironically owned by the deputy's father, had a flat roof accessible from the back staircase used for inventory storage. Elias moved. He kept to the shadows, staying low, moving with the patience of a man who'd spent years hunting deer and elk. Quick wasn't always better. Quiet was. The hardware store's back door was unlocked. Inside, the smell of metal and sawdust, shelves of tools, nails, wire. Empty. Everyone had cleared out when the shooting started. He found the stairs, climbed quickly, emerged onto the roof. From here, he could see everything. The bank's rear door, the windows, the mounted gunman in front, still watching the street with that shotgun. Deputy Morrison, no longer moving, maybe unconscious or dead. And through the second-floor window of the bank, movement. Shadows pacing. One of them was watching the back. Smart. Elias settled into position behind the false front of the hardware store. Decorative facade that made the building look taller than it was. Perfect cover. He opened the case, pulled out the Winchester, checked the load. 15 rounds. Lever action, smooth as water. His hands didn't shake. Hadn't shaken in years. Not since the first winter after Margaret died, when he'd learned that grief and necessity don't mix well with trembling fingers. Now came the waiting. Time moved different in moments like this. Elias had experienced it before. Hunting, mostly. That stretched-out feeling where seconds felt like minutes, and your whole awareness narrowed to breathing, heartbeat, and the target. Below, voices carried from inside the bank. "How much longer?" one of the robbers, anxious. "Soon as they load it. Keep them covered." "That deputy, you think he's dead?" "Don't know, don't care. Focus." Through the second-floor window, Elias saw a shadow move. One of them was up there, watching. Probably had a rifle trained on the street, covering their escape route. The mounted gunman shifted, glanced back toward the bank entrance. "How we doing in there?" "5 more minutes," came the reply. 5 minutes. Elias did the math. The sheriff still hadn't shown. Either he was planning something or he'd decided discretion beat valor. Neither option helped the hostages. In 5 minutes, the robbers would have their money. Would need to move fast, get out of town before resistance organized. which meant they'd either leave the hostages alive as a delaying tactic or kill them to prevent identification. Elias had seen enough desperate men to know which way that coin usually flipped. He adjusted his position, got comfortable. The Winchester rested against the facade, barrel steady. He wasn't planning to shoot anyone, not yet, not unless... The back door of the bank opened. Elias froze. One of the robbers emerged, moving quick, a canvas bag slung over his shoulder. Heavy. Money. He was alone. The smart ones always had an exit plan separate from the obvious one. While everyone watched the front, someone slipped out the back. The man moved fast toward the alley that led to the edge of town, where horses were probably waiting. Elias tracked him through the sights. 30 yards. Clear shot. Easy. The robber glanced around, saw nothing, kept moving. 20 yards. 15. He was going to make it, would disappear into the maze of back alleys, meet up with his partners later, split the money, and vanish. Meanwhile, inside the bank, the other two would realize the money was gone. Would panic. Elias saw the next 5 minutes like watching a play he'd already seen. Panic leads to mistakes. Mistakes lead to violence. Someone would grab a hostage. Someone would pull a trigger. Blood would hit the floor, and Red Hollow would bury another innocent because good people waited for permission to act. Margaret's voice again. You know what needs doing. He did. The robber was 10 yards from the alley mouth when Elias stood up, Winchester raised. Far enough. The man spun, hand dropping to his holster. Fast, practiced. But Elias had already made his decision. The Winchester cracked, sharp, clean, impossibly precise. The robber's revolver exploded from his grip before he'd cleared leather, spinning through the air in a shower of bent metal and broken wood. The gun hit the ground 8 feet away, useless. The man stared at his empty hand, then up at the roof where Elias stood silhouetted against the morning sky. Don't, Elias said quietly. For 3 seconds, the robber considered his options. Saw the rifle trained on his chest. Saw the distance. Saw the steadiness in the old man's stance. Made the smart choice. Hands went up. On your knees! The robber knelt, confusion and fear mixing on his face. Who the hell? Quiet! Inside the bank, shouting erupted. They'd heard the shot. What was that? Check the back. It's Henry. Something happened to Henry. The front door banged open. One of the robbers appeared, wild-eyed, gun drawn. The mounted gunman wheeled his horse around. What's going on? Henry's down. Someone's out there. Confusion, panic, exactly what Elias needed. From 3 blocks away, finally, the sheriff appeared, running with 4 deputized men, guns drawn. About damn time. The robber at the front saw them coming, swore, ducked back inside. Stay back. We got hostages. We'll kill them. Sheriff Coleman skidded to a stop 30 yards from the bank, breathing hard. Let them go, and we'll talk. Talk? You're gonna hang us. Nobody's hanging anybody if you let them go. While they shouted, Elias kept his rifle trained on the kneeling robber below. Didn't move, didn't blink. The man looked up at him. You made a mistake, old man. Maybe. They're gonna kill everyone in there because of you. Maybe. They're gonna sit right with you? Elias didn't answer, just watched, waited. Because he knew something the robber didn't. Panic burned hot and fast. Men in panic made mistakes, made them quick. 30 seconds later it happened. The second robber burst from the back door, running, no bag, just terror and desperation. He made it 3 steps before he saw Elias on the roof. Froze. Raised his gun. Elias fired. Same shot, same precision. The revolver flew from the man's hand, leaving him empty-handed and shocked. Down, Elias said. The second robber dropped. 2 down. 1 left inside with 7 hostages. From the front. Charlie? Henry? Where are you? No answer. The third robber, the one still inside, was alone now. Knew it. Could feel it. Sheriff Coleman's voice carried. It's over. Your partners are down. Let the hostages go and we'll shut up. A crash from inside, glass breaking. Then, I'm coming out. I got a woman. Anyone shoots, she dies. The front door opened. The last robber emerged, arm locked around Mrs. Patterson's throat, gun pressed to her head. She was crying, shaking, absolutely terrified. Clear the street. I'm taking a horse and riding out. Anyone follows, she's dead. The sheriff lowered his gun. All right, easy now. Just take it easy. Elias watched from the roof. The robber backed toward one of the horses, dragging Mrs. Patterson with him. She stumbled, nearly fell. He jerked her upright. Move faster! She tried. Terror made her clumsy. They reached the horse. The robber tried to mount while keeping the gun on her, nearly dropped it, caught himself. Sloppy, desperate, dangerous. Elias tracked him through the sights. No shot. Too close to Mrs. Patterson. Too risky. The robber got one foot in the stirrup. Mrs. Patterson twisted, maybe on purpose, maybe just panic. For half a second, maybe less, the gun pulled away from her head. Elias fired. The rifle cracked. The revolver spun away into the dust for the third time that morning. The robber stared at his empty hand, absolute disbelief on his face. Then Sheriff Coleman and his men rushed in, tackled him, dragged him down. It was over. The next hour blurred together in a chaos of voices, questions, and shocked faces. The hostages stumbled out of the bank, 7 of them, shaken but alive. Mrs. Patterson collapsed into her husband's arms, sobbing. The others just stood there, trying to process what had almost happened. Deputy Morrison was alive, barely. Doc Henderson worked on him in the street, shouting for supplies, hands bloody but moving with purpose. The 3 robbers sat in the dirt, hands tied, looking dazed. The one who'd been holding Mrs. Patterson kept staring at his empty hand like it belonged to someone else. And Elias climbed down from the roof, Winchester cradled in his arms, moving slowly because his knees weren't what they used to be. He emerged into the street and everyone stopped. Just stopped. Stared. Because nobody knew what to do with the quiet farmer who'd just ended a hostage situation with 3 impossible shots. Sheriff Coleman approached first, hat in hand. Varnes. Sheriff, that was some shooting. Elias didn't respond, just stood there waiting for whatever came next. Coleman looked him over, really looked, maybe for the first time in 12 years. Where'd you learn to shoot like that? Practice? Must have been a lot of practice. Was. The sheriff wanted more. Elias could see it in his face, wanted the story, the explanation, the reason why a man nobody noticed had skills nobody expected. But Elias wasn't interested in explanations. Deputy gonna live? He asked instead. Coleman glanced back at Morrison. Doc thinks so. Lost blood, but the bullet went clean through. He's young, strong. Good. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Coleman said, You probably saved 8 lives today. You know that? Elias looked at the hostages, at Mrs. Patterson still crying, at Morrison on the ground fighting to stay conscious. Maybe, he said. No, maybe about it. Coleman extended his hand. Thank you. Elias shook it, brief, formal. Then he turned to leave. Varnes, wait. He stopped. Coleman stepped closer, voice lower. I've been sheriff here 6 years. Thought I knew everyone. Thought I knew you. You don't. Yeah, I'm starting to see that. He paused. We could use someone like you, on the right side of things. Elias looked at him. Coleman pulled something from his vest. A badge. Tin star. Worn, but clean. Deputy position just opened up. Morrison's gonna need time to heal. Town needs someone who doesn't freeze when things go bad. He held out the badge. Someone who can actually shoot. Elias stared at the star. 12 years he'd lived outside this town. 12 years invisible. Now they wanted him. Part of him wanted to laugh. Bitter, tired laughter at the absurdity of being needed only after proving useful. But another part, smaller, quieter, recognized something else. A reason to get up that wasn't just routine and stubbornness. A purpose beyond talking to a grave marker every morning. He took the badge, felt the weight of it in his palm. Heavier than it looked. When do I start? He asked. Coleman smiled. Already did. The badge sat on Elias's kitchen table for 3 days before he pinned it on. Not because he was reconsidering. Once he decided something, it stayed decided. But because wearing a tin star meant something different than carrying a rifle. Meant visibility. Meant people would look at him expecting answers, expecting action, expecting him to be someone he'd never claimed to be. He picked it up on his 4th morning, held it to the light coming through the window. The metal was scratched, worn smooth in places from years of someone else wearing it. He He wondered whose badge it had been before Morrison got shot, wondered if they'd quit or died or just walked away when the job got too heavy. Margaret's photograph sat on the mantel, the only one he had, taken in Dodge City on their wedding day. She was smiling, actually smiling, caught mid-laugh at something the photographer had said. "What do you think?" he asked the empty room. The silence answered the way it always did. He pinned the badge to his shirt, put on his hat, and walked outside to feed the chickens. The routine hadn't changed. Wouldn't change. Badge or no badge, the land still needed working, the animals still needed tending, and Margaret's grave still got its morning coffee. But when he rode into Red Hollow that Thursday, right on schedule, same as always, everything else had changed. People stared. Not the way they used to, eyes sliding past him like he was part of the landscape. This was different, direct, uncomfortable. Jensen saw him coming and actually stepped out from behind the counter. "Deputy Varnes," he said, and the title sounded wrong in his mouth, like he was trying out a word from a foreign language. "Just Varnes." "Right, sure." Jensen shifted his weight. "Heard what you did at the bank. That was something. Needed doing." Yeah, I guess it did." He paused. "Anyway, got those nails you wanted. Came in yesterday." Elias paid, loaded the supplies, and moved on to the next errand. Same script, different reactions. Mrs. Patterson actually hugged him, grabbed him right there on the street, tears in her eyes, thanking him over and over until he gently extracted himself and kept walking. The blacksmith wanted to buy him a drink. The seamstress offered to mend his shirts free of charge. Even the priest nodded with something that looked like respect. It was exhausting. By noon, Elias had finished his errands and was ready to head home when Sheriff Coleman found him loading the wagon. "Got a minute?" Elias glanced at the sun. "Few." Coleman smiled like that was funny. "This way." They walked to the sheriff's office, a single-story building that smelled like coffee, sweat, and old tobacco. Inside, 2 cells sat empty in the back. The 3 bank robbers had been transferred to the territorial prison 2 days ago, bound for trial and probably hanging. Coleman poured 2 cups of coffee without asking, handed one to Elias. "So here's the situation," he said, settling into the chair behind his desk. "Morrison's alive, but he won't be back for months. Doc says the shoulder's healing, but he lost a lot of blood. Needs time." Elias sipped the coffee. Terrible. Burned and bitter. "Town council met last night," Coleman continued. "Voted to make your position official. Deputy salary is $40 a month, plus ammunition and boarding if you want it." "Don't need boarding." "Figured, but the offer stands." He leaned back. "Job's mostly keeping the peace, breaking up fights at the saloon, settling disputes, making sure nobody gets too stupid on Saturday nights. Once a week you ride circuit to the ranches, check for problems. Not exciting, but it's steady." "And when it's not steady?" Coleman's expression shifted. "Then it's like Tuesday, fast, violent, and someone bleeds." He set down his cup. "You handled that. Most men wouldn't have." "Most men aren't stupid enough to get involved." "Maybe. Or maybe most men freeze when it matters." He studied Elias. "You didn't freeze. Question is, why not? What made a farmer nobody talks to suddenly decide to play hero?" Elias didn't answer right away. Let the question sit there while he considered how much truth to give. "Wasn't about being a hero," he said finally. "It was about math." "Math?" 7 hostages, 3 gunmen, sheriff 3 blocks away. Odds said people were going to die if nobody acted. He shrugged. "I had a rifle and a clear shot. Math was simple." Coleman laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "You make it sound easy." "Didn't say easy. Said simple. Different things." They sat in silence for a moment, drinking terrible coffee and listening to the town move outside. Wagons rattling, people talking, horses clopping down the packed dirt street. "I've been doing this 6 years, Coleman said eventually. "Sheriff before me lasted 2 before someone shot him in the back over a cattle dispute. One before that drank himself dead. It's not a job that attracts stability." He met Elias's eyes. "But you strike me as stable, steady, the kind of man who doesn't panic." "Don't know me well enough to say that." "No, but I know what I saw. And I know Red Hollow needs more men who don't run when guns come out." He pulled open a desk drawer, retrieved a holster and gun belt. This was Morrison's spare, Colt Peacemaker, .45 caliber, cleaned and loaded. Consider it part of the uniform. Elias looked at the gun but didn't take it. Got my own. Winchester's fine for distance. This is for close work. Coleman pushed the belt across the desk. Take it. You're wearing a badge now. People expect you to carry proper. After a moment, Elias picked up the belt, felt the weight of the Colt. Well maintained. Good balance. He strapped it on, settling the holster against his hip. It felt wrong, foreign. But then, everything about this felt wrong. There's a town meeting tonight, Coleman said. Council wants to introduce you officially. Shake hands, make a speech, that sort of thing. Don't do speeches. Didn't figure you did. Just show up, let them see the badge, nod when they clap. That'll be enough. Elias doubted that, but didn't argue. What time? 7, Town Hall. Coleman stood, extending his hand. Welcome to the job, deputy. They shook. Firm grip, brief. As Elias turned to leave, Coleman added, one more thing. He stopped. You saved those people. That matters. Don't let anyone tell you different. Elias didn't respond. Just walked out into the afternoon sun, climbed onto his wagon, and headed home. The chickens didn't care about badges. Neither did the fence that needed fixing or the weeds growing in the garden. The work remained, indifferent to whatever titles people wanted to pin on him. He spent the afternoon doing what he always did, mending, hauling, sweating in the late summer heat. When the sun started dropping, he washed up, changed into a clean shirt, and rode back to town. The meeting was already underway when he arrived. Town hall was packed. Seemed like half of Red Hollow had shown up, filling the wooden benches and standing along the walls. People turned when he entered, and the murmur of conversation died down. Coleman waved him forward. Elias walked to the front, boots loud on the wooden floor, feeling every eye tracking him. Mayor Blackwood stood at the podium, round man with mutton chops and a voice that carried. He'd been mayor for 8 years, mostly because nobody else wanted the job. Ladies and gentlemen, Blackwood began, we're here tonight to formally recognize the man who prevented what could have been a terrible tragedy. Elias Varnes has agreed to serve as deputy sheriff, and I think we can all agree that Red Hollow is safer for it. Applause. Polite but genuine. Elias stood there, hat in hand, saying nothing. Now, Deputy Varnes isn't much for speeches, Blackwood continued with a smile, so I won't embarrass him by asking for one. But I will say this. When danger came to our town, he didn't hide. He acted. That's the kind of man we need wearing a badge. More applause. Elias waited for it to die down, then said, I'll do the job, that's all. Short, direct, true. Blackwood looked like he wanted more, but Coleman stepped in. That's all we need to hear. Deputy Varnes will be patrolling regular, handling disputes and making sure everyone stays safe. You got problems, you bring them to him or me. Questions? A rancher in the back raised his hand. What about rustlers? We lost 12 head last month. Nobody did anything. Bring me the details, Elias said. I'll look into it. You gonna track them down? If the trail's fresh enough? Another voice from the side. What if there's another robbery, another gang? Then we deal with it. How? Elias looked at the man who'd asked. Same way we dealt with the last one, carefully. That got a few nervous chuckles. The questions continued for another 20 minutes, everything from property disputes to concerns about drifters to complaints about the saloon staying open too late. Elias answered when he could, deferred to Coleman when he couldn't. Finally, Blackwood wrapped it up. I think that's enough for tonight. Let's give Deputy Varnes a chance to settle into the role. Thank you all for coming. People filed out slowly, some stopping to shake Elias's hand or offer congratulations. He endured it with the same patience he used for everything else. Quiet, minimal responses, waiting for it to end. When the hall finally emptied, only Coleman remained. You did fine, the sheriff said. Didn't do anything. Exactly. You showed up, wore the badge, let them see you're real. That's all they needed. He clapped Elias on the shoulder. Get some rest. Tomorrow you start earning that $40. Elias rode home under a sky full of stars, the night air cool against his face. The cabin looked the same as always, dark, quiet, waiting. He unsaddled the horse, checked the animals, and went inside. The badge came off first thing. He set it on the table, stared at it for a long moment. This was real now, not just a reaction to violence, not just a single moment of decision. This was a job, a role, a promise to keep showing up. He wasn't sure he wanted it, but he'd said yes, and Elias Varnes didn't go back on his word. Sleep came hard that night. When it finally arrived, it brought dreams of Margaret, of the bank, of gunshots echoing in empty streets. He woke before dawn, made coffee, and carried 2 cups out to the grave. "Started the job," he said to the wooden cross. "Don't know what I'm doing, but I guess that's nothing new." The wind whispered through the grass. "People look at me different now, like they expect something, like I'm supposed to be someone I'm not." He drank his coffee slowly, watching the sun climb. "Wish you were here to tell me I'm being stupid. You were always better at that than I was." No answer. Just wind and morning birds and the endless quiet of a land that didn't care about badges or expectations. After finishing both cups, he went inside, pinned the badge back on, and got ready for his first official day. The job, it turned out, was mostly boring. Elias spent the first week learning routines he'd never paid attention to before: patrol schedules, town ordinances, the politics of who hated who and why. He broke up 2 fistfights outside the saloon, both involving the same drunk who apparently thought everyone was cheating at cards. He settled a dispute between neighbors over a fence line that had been argued about for 3 years. He checked on the ranches, noted the rustling problem, and started looking for patterns. The work wasn't complicated, just tedious. What surprised him was how visible he'd become. Couldn't walk down the street without someone stopping him. Couldn't eat a meal at the diner without folks wanting to sit and talk. Couldn't do anything without the weight of that badge making him public property. He hated it, but he kept showing up, kept doing the job, kept his complaints to himself and his morning coffee with Margaret. 2 weeks in, things got interesting. Elias was checking the back alleys behind Main Street. Thieves like to work those spaces at night, when he heard the scream. Female. Terrified. Coming from behind the seamstress shop. He ran. Found a girl, maybe 16, backed against the wall by 2 men. One had her wrist, the other was blocking her escape. Both were grinning like wolves. "Problem here," Elias said, hand resting on the Colt. The men turned. He recognized them, drifters who'd been hanging around town for a few days, drinking too much and causing minor trouble. Names were Carter and Boone, if he remembered right. Carter, the bigger one, sneered. "No problem, deputy. Just talking to the lady." "Don't look like talking. She's fine. Aren't you, sweetheart?" The girl shook her head, tears on her face. "Please, let her go," Elias said. Not loud, not aggressive, just factual. Boone laughed. "Or what, old man? You gonna shoot us?" "Don't want to." "But you ain't gonna do nothing else, are you? You're what, 60? We're half your age and twice as mean." Elias looked at him. Really looked. Saw a kid playing tough, same as the bank robber on the horse. Saw someone who'd probably bullied his way through life and never met real consequences. "Age ain't what matters," Elias said quietly. "What matters is I'm asking nice once. Won't ask twice." Carter's hand dropped to his gun. "You threatening us?" "Stating facts." For a few seconds it balanced on a knife edge. Elias could see them calculating, weighing odds, deciding if pride was worth the risk. Boone moved first, hand flashing toward his holster. Elias drew and fired in one smooth motion. The bullet hit the wall 3 inches from Boone's head, showering him with splinters. Both men froze. "Next one's lower," Elias said, Colt steady in his hand. "Now let the girl go." Carter released her wrist. She bolted past them, running toward Main Street. "You just made a mistake, old man," Carter growled. "Maybe, but you're still leaving." "Says who?" "Says the badge. Says the gun. Says the fact that I'm not interested in arresting you if you walk away right now." Elias tilted his head. "But if you stay, I'll find reasons. Drunk and disorderly, assault, resisting lawful orders. Plenty of room in those cells, and the judge doesn't come through for another month." He let that sink in. "Your choice. Walk, or we see how comfortable you are with iron bars." They walked, muttering threats and curses, but they walked. Elias watched until they disappeared around the corner, then holstered the Colt. His hand was shaking slightly, adrenaline catching up. He took a breath, steadied himself, and went to find the girl. She was with her mother outside the general store, both of them crying and holding each other. When they saw Elias, the mother rushed over. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you, thank you." "She all right?" "Yes. Scared, but you stopped them. You saved her." Elias nodded. "Those men staying in town?" "The boarding house, I think. I'll take care of it." He did. Went straight to Mrs. Henderson, who ran the boarding house, and strongly suggested Carter and Boone find accommodations elsewhere. She agreed immediately. Apparently they'd been causing problems there too. By sunset, both men were gone, riding out with promises to return and settle scores. Elias doubted they would. Bullies liked easy targets. He wasn't one. That night he sat on his porch cleaning the Colt, thinking about the look in Boone's eyes when the bullet hit the wall. Pure shock. The kid had genuinely believed Elias wouldn't act. People kept making that mistake. He finished cleaning, reloaded, set the gun aside. The stars were coming out, same as they did every night. Indifferent to badges and bullies and men trying to figure out what they'd signed up for. Margaret would have something to say about all this. Probably would have laughed at him trying to play lawman at his age. Probably would have also reminded him that doing what's right doesn't require permission or youth. He missed her voice. Missed the way she could cut through his overthinking with simple truth. Getting complicated, he said to the empty porch. People expect things now. Expect me to solve problems, be someone. Don't know if I can do that. The night offered no answers. He went inside, lay down, and waited for sleep. It came eventually, bringing dreams of younger days when problems were simpler and the future felt like something manageable. The next morning brought a visitor. Elias was mending the chicken coop. Damn coyote had tested the fence again during the night. When he heard hoofbeats approaching, he stood, hand instinctively moving toward the rifle leaning against the fence post. A woman rode up. Late 30s, maybe 40, dark hair pulled back, practical riding clothes, and an expression that said she'd traveled a long way and wasn't in the mood for delays. She dismounted, tied her horse, and walked straight toward him. Elias Varnes? That's right. My name is Sarah Brennan. I'm a school teacher from Thornton Ridge, about 80 miles west. She pulled a folded paper from her jacket. I need your help. Elias wiped his hands on his pants. I'm a deputy in Red Hollow. Thornton Ridge isn't my jurisdiction. I know, but I've spent the last month asking for help and nobody will listen. She held out the paper. Please, just read this. He took it, unfolded it. The handwriting was neat, precise, the words urgent. To whom it may concern, 3 women have disappeared from Thornton Ridge in the past 6 weeks. Emily Parker, age 19. Jane Whitmore, age 23. Rebecca Cross, age 20. All vanished without trace. Local authorities claim they simply left town. They didn't. I fear for their safety and believe foul play is involved. If anyone can help, please contact Sarah Brennan, Thornton Ridge School. Elias read it twice, then looked up at her. You go to the law? Sheriff Dawson says they ran off with men. Won't investigate. Why not? Because he's lazy, corrupt, or both. Because investigating means effort, and effort means possibly upsetting people who matter in town. Her voice hardened. Because 3 young women aren't worth his time. What makes you think they didn't leave? Emily was engaged, wedding in 2 months. Jane was saving to buy her family's farm. Rebecca just got accepted to a teaching position in Denver. Sarah's eyes met his. These weren't women looking to run. These were women building lives. And nobody else cares? Their families care. I care. But caring doesn't find them. She paused. I heard about what you did in Red Hollow. How you stopped those bank robbers. How you don't back down. That was different. How? That was here. My town. My responsibility. These are human lives. Doesn't that make them everyone's responsibility? Elias looked at the letter again, then at the woman standing in his yard asking for help that wasn't his to give. He should say no. Should explain that he had a job here, obligations, a routine that didn't include riding 80 miles to chase problems in someone else's jurisdiction. Should, but he thought about the bank, about 7 hostages who'd lived because someone acted when no one else would, about the girl in the alley who'd been grabbed because men thought they could take what they wanted without consequence, about the fact that sometimes doing what's right meant ignoring what's convenient. When did the last one disappear, he asked. 4 days ago. Rebecca. Any leads? Anything that connects them? All 3 worked at the hotel at some point. All 3 were last seen near the edge of town. Sarah pulled out another paper, a hand-drawn map. I've marked where each was last seen. There's a pattern, but I don't know what it means. Elias studied the map. She was right. The locations formed a rough line, all on the western edge of town near what looked like old mining territory. The sheriff really won't look into this? He laughed when I brought it to him, said young women have been running off since the beginning of time, and I should mind my own business. And you didn't. Would you? He thought about that, about what kind of person kept pushing when everyone else quit, about stubborn school teachers who rode 80 miles alone looking for help from strangers. Margaret would have liked her. I'll need to talk to Sheriff Coleman, he said finally. This isn't a decision I can make alone. Sarah's expression shifted, hope mixing with caution. And if he says no, then I'll have a choice to make. They rode back to Red Hollow together, neither talking much. When they arrived, Elias took her straight to Coleman's office. The sheriff listened to the whole story, studying the letter and map, asking questions Sarah answered with precision and frustration. When she finished, Coleman leaned back in his chair and sighed. This is a mess. Yes, Sarah said. You understand that if Varnes goes to Thornton Ridge, he's got no authority there, no jurisdiction, no backup. I understand. And if he gets into trouble, gets hurt, gets arrested, gets killed, that's on him. And you. I understand that too. Coleman looked at Elias. What do you think? Think 3 women disappearing isn't normal, Elias said. Think if nobody investigates, it'll happen again. That's not our problem. Maybe it should be. They stared at each other. Coleman broke first, shaking his head. You've been a deputy for 3 weeks, haven't even finished training, and you want to ride into another town's business. Don't want to. Seems like what's needed. There's a difference between brave and stupid, Varnes. I know, done both enough to tell them apart. Coleman stood, walked to the window, looked out at the street. Long silence. Finally, you go unofficial. No badge, no authority, just a private citizen looking into things. That'll work. Will it? Because if Dawson finds out you're nosing around, he can arrest you for interference. Let him try. Sarah stepped forward. Sheriff Coleman, I know this isn't your jurisdiction. I know it's a risk. But these women deserve someone who gives a damn. And from everything I've heard, your deputy is that someone. Coleman turned to face her. You're putting a lot of faith in a man you just met. I'm out of options. Faith is all I've got left. Another long pause. Then Coleman walked to his desk, pulled out a piece of paper and started writing. This is a letter of introduction, he said, not looking up. States that Elias Varnes is a private investigator working on behalf of concerned parties. Gives him no official power, but might keep Dawson from throwing him in jail immediately. He signed it, folded it, handed it to Elias. You've got 1 week. After that, I expect you back here doing the job I'm paying you for. Elias took the letter. Understood. And Varnes, don't get yourself killed. I just got you trained. Wasn't planning on it. Sarah looked between them, relief flooding her face. Thank you. Both of you. Coleman grunted. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when he comes back alive. They left the office. Outside, Sarah turned to Elias. When can you leave? Dawn tomorrow. Need to get supplies, make arrangements for the farm. I'll meet you at the edge of town, East Road. You're coming? It's my town, my students. Of course I'm coming. Elias almost argued, then saw the set of her jaw and decided against it. Some fights weren't worth having. Dawn, he repeated. She nodded, mounted her horse, and rode off toward the boarding house. Elias stood there for a moment, letter in hand, wondering what he'd just agreed to. Then he went to prepare for a journey he had no business taking to investigate crimes he had no authority to solve. Sometimes doing what's right looked an awful lot like stupidity. But he'd learned long ago that the difference didn't matter much when people needed help. He spent the rest of the day getting ready, packing supplies, cleaning the Winchester, making sure the Colt was loaded and his spare ammunition was sufficient. He arranged for Jensen's son to check on the farm while he was gone, feed the animals, make sure nothing burned down. That evening, he sat on the porch one last time, watching the sun set over land he'd worked for 12 years. Part of him wanted to stay. Wanted to forget about Thornton Ridge and missing women and sheriffs who didn't care. Wanted to stick to the routine that had kept him alive this long. But a bigger part, the part shaped by Margaret's memory and too many years of watching bad things happen because good people stayed quiet, knew he couldn't. 3 women were missing. Nobody was looking. That had to change. He went inside, lay down, and tried to sleep. Tomorrow, he'd ride west into someone else's problem and try to make it right. Whether he succeeded or failed didn't matter as much as the fact that he'd try. That, at least, he could live with. Dawn came cold and gray, the kind of morning that made a man question decisions made in warmer light. Elias was already awake, had been for an hour, drinking coffee and staring at the Winchester propped against the wall. He'd packed light, bedroll, provisions for a week, ammunition, the letter from Coleman folded in his shirt pocket. The badge sat on the table where he'd left it. He picked it up, turned it over in his fingers, then set it back down. Not his jurisdiction, not his authority. Just a man riding toward trouble because nobody else would. He saddled his horse, a bay mare named Keeper, who'd been with him for 6 years and tolerated his silences better than most people did. She stamped once, impatient, ready to move. "I know," he told her. "Don't make sense to me either." The ride to town took longer in the pre-dawn darkness. When he reached the eastern edge, Sarah was already waiting, sitting on her horse with the kind of stillness that said she'd been there a while. "Thought you might change your mind," she said. "Thought about it. But you came anyway." "Seems so." They rode west without further conversation. The silence stretched comfortable between them, 2 people who understood that talking didn't make miles pass faster. The land changed gradually as morning broke. Red Hollow sat in relatively flat territory, good for farming if you had the water and the patience. West meant hills, rockier ground, clusters of pine and scrub oak that thickened into something approaching forest. Old mining country played out decades ago when the gold stopped coming easy and the companies moved on to richer strikes. Around midday, Sarah finally spoke. "You're wondering why I'm doing this?" Elias glanced at her. "Not my business." "I'll tell you anyway." She adjusted her reins. "Emily Parker was my student, bright girl, wanted to be a nurse. Used to stay after class asking questions about everything, science, history, how the world worked beyond Thornton Ridge." Her voice tightened. "Day she disappeared, she'd told me about the wedding dress her mother was making. Showed me the fabric. She was excited." "And the others?" "Jane, I knew from church. Good family, hardworking. Rebecca I'd just met. She was supposed to start teaching next month. We'd had coffee twice, talking about lesson plans and which students would give her trouble." Sarah looked straight ahead. "These weren't strangers to me. They were real. And when I went to Sheriff Dawson, he treated me like I was hysterical, patted my hand and told me not to worry my pretty head about things I didn't understand." "So you rode 80 miles looking for someone who'd listen." "I rode 80 miles looking for someone who'd act." "There's a difference." Elias couldn't argue with that. They stopped twice to rest the horses and eat cold provisions. Sarah proved surprisingly practical. No complaints about the pace or the discomfort, just steady forward motion. By evening, the landscape had shifted entirely. Dense woods now, broken by clearings and the occasional abandoned mine shaft, marked with warning signs weathered into illegibility. "How much further?" Elias asked. "Another hour to town. We could push through or camp here." He studied the fading light. "Camp. Horses need rest." They found a clearing with good sight lines and a stream for water. Elias built a small fire while Sarah tended the horses. Practiced movements, no wasted effort. He respected that. Over a dinner of jerky and hardtack, she asked, "What did you do before Red Hollow?" "Farming, same as now." "That's not what I meant." He knew what she meant. Knew she was asking about the shooting, the steadiness under pressure, the things a farmer shouldn't necessarily know how to do. "Worked cattle drives when I was younger," he said finally. "Kansas to Montana, mostly. Saw some trouble. Learned to handle it." "Just cattle drives?" "Scouted some. Hunted bounties for a while when money got tight." He poked the fire. "Did what needed doing to survive, same as everyone out here." "And your wife? The one they say you buried on your land?" Elias went still. "Who told you that?" "People talk, especially when a stranger rides into town asking about someone." She softened her voice. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry." "Then don't." Silence fell heavy between them. Sarah looked like she wanted to apologize again, then thought better of it. Smart woman. After a while, she asked, "Why'd you really come? You don't know these women. Don't owe me anything." Elias watched the fire, thinking about Margaret, about graves and promises, and the way silence could eat a man alive if he let it. Because nobody should disappear and have folks just shrug, he said. Because if I don't help when I can, I'm no different than the people who looked away when I needed it. When did you need it? Long time ago. Doesn't matter now. But it did matter. Always would. He could still remember the doctor stumbling drunken to their cabin, reeking of whiskey, fumbling with his bag while Margaret burned with fever. Could remember riding for help and finding excuses. Too far, too late, too complicated. Could remember burying her alone because the minister was busy with a wealthier family's crisis. The frontier didn't forgive, didn't forget, just kept taking, unless someone stood up and said no. Sarah seemed to understand she'd hit something raw. She let it drop, finished her food in silence, then spread out her bedroll on the opposite side of the fire. I'll take first watch, Elias said. Why? You expecting trouble? Always expect trouble. Keeps you ready when it shows up. She didn't argue, just settled down and closed her eyes. Elias sat with his back against a tree, Winchester across his lap, watching the darkness beyond the firelight. Night sounds surrounded them. Crickets, the occasional owl, wind through the pines. Peaceful if you didn't think too hard about what could be hiding in all that darkness. He thought about the three women, wondered if they'd seen it coming, wondered if they'd fought, or if it happened too fast for fighting. Wondered if they were still alive somewhere, waiting for help that might never arrive. The wondering didn't help, never did, but he couldn't stop it. Around midnight, he woke Sarah for her shift. She took the rifle without complaint, settled into his spot, alert and ready. Wake me if anything moves, he said. I'm a school teacher, not a fool. I know how watches work. Despite everything, he almost smiled. Fair enough. Sleep came reluctantly, bringing dreams of empty streets and gunshots that echoed wrong. He woke twice, once to Sarah adding wood to the fire, once to nothing at all, just the familiar weight of dread that had been his companion for 9 years. Dawn found them moving again. Thornton Ridge appeared around mid-morning, looking exactly like every other dying mining town Elias had ever seen. One main street lined with buildings in various states of decay, a hotel that had seen better days, saloon with broken windows, general store, livery, and a church with a steeple listing slightly to the left. Maybe 300 people, if that. Enough to maintain the illusion of civilization, not enough to actually build anything lasting. Cheerful place, Elias muttered. Used to be bigger, before the mines played out. Sarah pointed to a building near the center of town. That's the hotel. All three women worked there at some point. And the sheriff? Office is next to the saloon. Don't expect a warm welcome. They rode in slowly, drawing stares from the few people on the street. Small towns noticed strangers, especially strangers who looked like they meant business. Elias noted everything, who watched, who looked away, who seemed nervous, old habits from bounty hunting, read the town before the town read you. They stopped at the hotel first. Two-story structure, paint peeling, sign that read Thornton House in faded letters. Inside, the lobby smelled like old carpet and desperation. A clerk stood behind the desk, young man, skinny, nervous energy. Help you? He asked, eyes darting between them. Need 2 rooms, Sarah said. 1 night, maybe more. Cash up front. While Sarah handled the arrangements, Elias looked around. The place was nearly empty. A few chairs, a staircase leading up, a door behind the desk marked private. You the owner? He asked the clerk. No, sir. That'd be Mr. Garrett. He's out back. I'd like to talk to him. The clerk hesitated. About what? Business. What kind of business? Elias didn't answer, just waited. Sometimes silence asked better questions than words. The clerk caved. I'll get him. He disappeared through the private door. Elias heard voices, low and tense, then footsteps. The man who emerged was mid-50s, heavy build, expensive suit that didn't quite fit right. His smile was automatic and empty. I'm Leonard Garrett. Welcome to the Thornton House. My clerk says you wanted to see me. Elias Varnes, this is Sarah Brennan. Garrett's smile flickered when he heard Sarah's name. Ah, Miss Brennan, I heard you were back in town. I'm sure you did. Still stirring up trouble about those girls. Still looking for answers about 3 missing women, Sarah corrected. Seems like the kind of thing people should care about. They left town. Happens all the time. He turned to Elias. Young women get restless, run off with men, chase dreams. Nothing sinister about it. All three of them? Elias asked. Like I said, happens all the time. Not usually in the space of 6 weeks. Garrett's smile hardened. I don't know what Miss Brennan told you, Mr. Varnes, but there's no mystery here. Just unfortunate coincidences. Unfortunate, Elias repeated. That's one word for it. What's your interest in this, you law? Private citizen, asking questions on behalf of concerned parties. Well, private citizen, maybe you should ask your questions somewhere else. This is a respectable establishment. I don't appreciate implications. Wasn't implying anything, just trying to understand. Understand this. Those women made their choices. Not my problem, they regret them. Sarah stepped forward. Emily Parker was engaged. Jane Whitmore had family here. Rebecca Cross had a job waiting. What choices were they regretting exactly? How should I know? I ran a hotel, not their lives. Garrett crossed his arms. Now, if you're done wasting my time, I've got work to do. He turned to leave. One more thing, Elias said. Garrett stopped, didn't turn around. What? You know a man named Dawson? Now Garrett turned, and his expression had shifted from annoyed to careful. Sheriff Dawson? Of course. Everyone knows the sheriff. He a friend of yours? We're acquainted. Why? Just wondering who tells him what to investigate and what to ignore. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Garrett walked back slowly, stopping a few feet from Elias. Up close, his eyes were cold despite the smile. You're new here, so I'll give you some advice. Thornton Ridge is a quiet town. We like it that way. People who come in asking uncomfortable questions tend to find themselves very uncomfortable very quickly. He paused. Understand? Elias met his gaze without blinking. I understand you're nervous about something. Question is what? You should leave. Just got here. Then don't stay long. Garrett walked away, disappearing through the private door. The clerk looked terrified, like he'd just witnessed something that would get him fired. Sarah let out a breath. Well, that went about as expected. He's scared. Or he's threatening us. Can be both. Elias picked up his bag. Let's get settled, then I want to see where those women disappeared. The rooms were small but clean. Elias dropped his gear, checked the window, second floor, overlooked the main street. Good view of approaches. Old habits. Downstairs, Sarah was waiting. Ready? Show me. They walked west through town, past buildings that looked abandoned, past lots overgrown with weeds. The prosperity was long gone, leaving only the skeleton of what mining money had built. Sarah stopped at the edge of town where the street gave way to forest. This is where Emily was last seen, coming back from visiting a friend who lived out there. She pointed to a small cabin barely visible through the trees. Never made it home. Elias studied the area. Dense woods, multiple paths. Easy to disappear into and harder to track out of. Jane? Sarah led him north 50 yards. Here, walking home from the general store. Broad daylight. And Rebecca? South. Same general area, different spot. Elias walked the perimeter looking for anything. Disturbed ground, broken branches, signs of struggle. Found nothing obvious. Too much time had passed. Too many feet had walked these paths. But Sarah was right about the pattern. All 3 disappearances clustered at the western edge of town, all 3 near the forest. What's out there? He asked, nodding toward the trees. Old mines, abandoned camps, couple of homesteads that nobody uses anymore. Anyone live out there now? Not that I know of. Sheriff Dawson claimed he searched, said he found nothing. You believe him? Sarah's expression answered before her words did. I believe he did the minimum required to say he tried. Elias looked at the sun, calculating hours of daylight left. I'm going to look around. You should head back to the hotel. I'm coming with you. No. These are my students, which is exactly why you're staying here. You've got ties to this town. People know you. I'm nobody. Nobody cares if I poke around where I shouldn't. And if you find something, then I'll come get you. She wanted to argue. He could see it. But she was smart enough to recognize sense. How long? Few hours. If I'm not back by dark, tell someone. Tell who? The sheriff who won't help? Good point. Then just be careful. He left her standing there, frustrated but safe, and headed into the woods. The forest swallowed him quickly. Dense undergrowth, old-growth pines that blocked most of the sunlight. Quiet except for birds and the occasional rustle of unseen animals. Elias moved carefully, eyes scanning for anything unusual. He'd tracked enough game and men to know what to look for. Broken twigs, disturbed ground, places where the natural pattern looked wrong. Found the first mine shaft 20 minutes in. Boarded up, warning signs faded but readable. He checked the boards, solid, dusty, undisturbed. Nobody had been through here recently. The second mine was a quarter-mile further. Same story. Third time proved different. The entrance was partially collapsed, rocks and timber blocking most of the opening. But someone had moved the debris recently. Elias could see fresh scuff marks, disturbed dirt. He approached slowly, hand on the Colt. The opening was narrow, but passable. Beyond it, darkness. Elias lit a match, held it up. The tunnel extended back into the hillside, shored up with timber that looked questionable at best. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness. The match burned down. He lit another. On the ground, half buried in dirt, a scrap of fabric. Blue cotton, torn. He picked it up, studied it. Could be nothing. Could be from anyone. Could be from one of the missing women. He pocketed the fabric, lit another match, and ventured deeper. The tunnel split after 30 feet. Left branch was collapsed completely. Right continued back into darkness, narrowing as it went. Elias followed it. The air got colder, the dripping louder. His boots crunched on loose rock. Then he heard something else. Voices. Faint, coming from somewhere ahead. He let the match die, moved in darkness, hand on the wall for guidance. The voices got clearer. 2 men, maybe 3. Told you to be careful. Wasn't my fault. Sheriff's asking questions. Elias crept forward until he could see light ahead. Another chamber, lit by lanterns. He stopped just short of the entrance, pressed against the wall, and listened. Garrett's getting nervous, one voice said. Older, authoritative. Garrett's always nervous, another replied. Younger, dismissive. He's got reason to be. That school teacher brought someone. Some shooter from Red Hollow. So? One man won't change anything. One man stopped a bank robbery and dropped 3 gunmen without killing any of them. That's not nothing. Silence. Then, what do you want to do? Watch him. See what he finds. If he gets too close, a pause. We deal with it. Same way we dealt with the others? If necessary. Elias's blood went cold. He'd heard enough. Started backing away, moving carefully, trying not to make noise. His boot hit a loose rock. The sound echoed like a gunshot. What was that? Someone's there! Elias ran. Behind him, shouts. Footsteps. Lantern light chasing through the darkness. He hit the main tunnel, sprinted toward the entrance. His shin cracked against something, old rail track or debris, and pain shot through his leg, but he kept moving. The entrance appeared ahead. Daylight. Freedom. A gunshot cracked behind him, ricocheting off stone. Elias burst into open air, didn't stop running. Into the woods, dodging trees, putting distance between himself and the mine. More shots. Closer than comfort, he dove behind a fallen log, drew the Colt, fired twice back toward the mine entrance. The shooting stopped, voices arguing, then nothing. Elias waited, breathing hard, leg throbbing. After 5 minutes of silence, he risked moving. Circled wide, using the forest for cover, making his way back toward town. By the time he reached the edge of the woods, the sun was setting and his leg hurt like someone had driven nails through it. Sarah was pacing outside the hotel. When she saw him, relief and anger crossed her face in equal measure. What happened? Found something, then found people who didn't want me finding things. He limped past her. We need to talk, somewhere private. In his room, he collapsed into a chair while Sarah examined his leg. Bad bruise forming, but nothing broken. You're an idiot, she said. Been called worse. What did you find? He pulled out the fabric. This. In one of the mines, fresh debris, recent disturbance. She took it, studied it. Her hands started shaking. This is Rebecca's. I recognize it from her dress. Elias nodded. There were men in there. talking about keeping things quiet, about dealing with problems the same way they dealt with the others. Sarah's face went pale. You think they're... Don't know what to think yet, but those women didn't just leave town. We need to tell the sheriff. The sheriff they mentioned by name? The one who's apparently asking questions on their behalf? She processed that. Dawson's involved. Seems likely. Then what do we do? That was the question, wasn't it? They were in a town where the law was compromised, with evidence that wouldn't hold up in any court, facing people who'd already made 3 women disappear and were willing to make more disappear to keep their secret. We find proof, Elias said. Real proof. Then we take it somewhere that matters. How? He didn't have an answer yet. Just pain in his leg and a piece of torn fabric that meant 3 families would never see their daughters again. But he'd come this far. Wasn't about to quit now. Give me tonight to think, he said. Tomorrow, we start asking the right questions to the wrong people. Sarah looked at him like he was crazy. Maybe he was, but crazy was better than walking away while people got hurt. Outside, full dark had fallen. Somewhere in this town, someone was very worried about what Elias had found. Good. Let them worry. Tomorrow, they'd have bigger problems. Morning came with a knock on the door that jolted Elias awake, hand reaching for the Colt before his eyes fully opened. Old instincts died hard. It's me, Sarah's voice came through the wood. He checked the window first, habit, then unlocked the door. She stepped in holding 2 tin cups of coffee, looking like she hadn't slept much either. Thought you might need this, she said, handing him one. The coffee was terrible, but hot. He drank it anyway. Did you think about it? She asked. What we're doing next? Thought about a lot of things. Mostly about how we're outnumbered, outgunned, and the local law wants us gone. That's not a plan. No, but it's the situation. He set down the cup. We need leverage. Something solid enough that we can take it over Dawson's head. Problem is, a piece of torn fabric won't do it. Could have come from anywhere. So we need more. We need proof someone's dead, or proof someone's alive and being held. Either way, we need something a territorial judge can't ignore. Sarah moved to the window, looked out at the street below. Early morning, few people moving. The families, Emily's parents, Jane's brother, Rebecca's mother, they'd talk to us. They already talked to the sheriff. He ignored them. They didn't have someone who'd listen, who'd believe them. Elias considered that. Families might know things they hadn't thought important, details the sheriff had dismissed. Worth trying, but we do it careful. If Dawson or Garrett get wind we're talking to people, they'll shut it down. Then we split up, cover more ground, less obvious. He didn't like it. Splitting up meant if trouble came, they'd face it alone. But she was right. 2 people asking questions separately drew less attention than 2 people moving together. You take the families, he said. You know them. They'll trust you more than a stranger. What will you do? Going to have a conversation with the sheriff, see what he knows and what he's willing to admit. That's dangerous. Most useful things are. He finished the coffee. We meet back here by noon. Anyone asks, we're just passing through, doing separate business. She nodded, then paused at the door. Elias, thank you for not giving up. Haven't found anything yet. You found enough to stay. That's more than anyone else did. After she left, Elias cleaned his guns, checked his ammunition, and tried to figure out what he'd say to a sheriff who was probably complicit in 3 murders. The direct approach rarely worked with corrupt law, but sometimes poking a hornet's nest was the only way to see what flew out. He strapped on the gun belt, pocketed the scrap of fabric, and headed downstairs. The street was busier now. Wagons rolling past, people heading to work, the mundane machinery of a town that pretended everything was normal. Elias walked slowly, taking measure of the place in daylight. The saloon looked closed. The general store was open, a handful of customers visible through the windows, and the sheriff's office sat exactly where Sarah had said. Squat building next to the saloon, single window, door that looked like it could take a battering. Elias pushed through. Inside, the office was smaller than Coleman's. 1 desk, 2 cells in back, both empty. A gun rack on the wall holding 3 rifles. And behind the desk, a man who looked like he'd been poured into his chair and forgotten. Sheriff Tom Dawson was maybe 50, running to fat, with eyes that had seen too much and cared about too little. He glanced up when Elias entered, irritation crossing his face. Help you? Name's Elias Varnes. I'm looking into the disappearances of 3 women from this town. Dawson's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. You're the one came in with Brennan yesterday. That's right. Well, Mr. Varnes, I appreciate your concern, but there's nothing to look into. Those women left of their own accord. You sure about that? I investigated personally, found no evidence of foul play. Where'd you look? Excuse me? Where exactly did you investigate? What did you check? Who did you talk to? Dawson leaned back, fingers laced over his belly. I don't have to justify my work to a stranger. No, but you might have to justify it to a territorial judge if I bring him evidence you ignored a crime. The sheriff's face darkened. You threatening me? Stating facts. 3 women gone in 6 weeks. That's a pattern. Patterns mean someone's responsible. Or it means young women get restless and leave. Happens all the time out here. You should know that. Elias pulled out the scrap of fabric, laid it on the desk. Found this yesterday, in one of the old mines west of town. Fresh disturbance, recent activity. One of the missing women wore a dress this color. Dawson glanced at it, then back at Elias. So? Could be from anyone. Could have been there for years. Could be. Or it could be evidence you missed because you didn't actually look. I looked. Where? I told you. Tell me specifics. Which mines? Which trails? What did you find? Dawson stood up, and despite the fat, he was a big man. Probably dangerous once before the years and the whiskey softened him. You're stepping on thin ice, friend. I'm the law here. You're nobody. And if you keep pushing, you'll find yourself in one of those cells on charges of interfering with official business. What official business? You just said there's no crime to investigate. Get out. Not until you answer my questions. I said get out. They stared at each other. Elias saw it clearly now. Whatever was happening in Thornton Ridge, Dawson was part of it. Either actively involved or paid to look the other way. Either way, he wasn't going to help. You know what I think? Elias said quietly. I think you know exactly what happened to those women, and I think you're protecting whoever did it. Dawson's hand dropped to his gun. That's slander. That's observation. And here's another observation. When I bring proof to the territorial court, they're going to ask why the local sheriff ignored it, going to wonder if incompetence or corruption explains it better. You got no proof. Not yet, but I will. Then bring it. Until then, you're just another troublemaker I can run out of town. Dawson stepped around the desk. Now leave before I decide you're drunk and disorderly. Elias held his ground for another few seconds, just to make the point, then turned and walked out. On the street, his heart was pounding harder than he'd like. Confronting corrupt law was always a gamble. Push too hard and they'd manufacture charges. Push too soft and they'd think you were bluffing. He'd pushed about right. Made Dawson nervous without giving him excuse to act. Now came the hard part. Finding proof before Dawson, or whoever he worked for, decided Elias was too much trouble to tolerate. He headed back toward the hotel, thinking through next steps. The families were Sarah's angle. The mines were too dangerous to search alone without better information. That left the hotel and Garrett, who'd been nervous yesterday, and probably more nervous now that Elias had talked to Dawson. Nervous people made mistakes, made admissions, sometimes made deals if they thought it would save their skin. Worth exploring. Elias changed direction, walked back to the Thornton house. The lobby was empty except for the same nervous clerk from yesterday. Mr. Garrett in? Elias asked. No, sir. He's out on business. Where? I don't know. He doesn't tell me his schedule. Elias studied the kid. Young, maybe 20, scared of something. What's your name? Thomas. Thomas, I'm going to be straight with you. I think something bad happened to those 3 women who worked here. I think your boss knows about it, and I think you might know something too. Thomas went pale. I don't know anything. Didn't say you did anything. Said you might know something. There's a difference. I can't help you. Can't or won't? Both, either. I can't. He glanced toward the private door like Garrett might appear. Please, you need to leave. Why? What are you afraid of? Nothing. I'm not afraid. I just can't help. but his hands were shaking and his voice cracked on the last word. This kid knew something. Question was whether fear or conscience would win. Elias softened his approach. Look, I'm not trying to get you in trouble, but 3 women are missing, maybe dead. If you know anything that could help find them or help their families get answers, that matters more than whatever you're scared of. You don't understand. This town, it's not what you think. Then explain it to me. Thomas looked like he might break. Like confession was right there, ready to spill out. Then the private door opened and Garrett emerged, and the moment shattered. Mr. Varnes, Garrett said coldly, I thought I made it clear you weren't welcome here. I'm a paying guest. That makes me welcome enough. Your money's good for 1 more night. After that, you're done. Fine by me. Won't need more than that. Garrett's eyes narrowed. You should leave Thornton Ridge today. Nothing good comes from stirring up trouble. Funny. Sheriff said the same thing, almost like you two rehearsed it. The sheriff and I both want what's best for this town, which is peace and quiet. Even if that peace covers up crimes, there are no crimes. Just a stubborn woman and an outsider who won't accept simple truth. Garrett stepped closer. I'm trying to be civil here, but civility has limits. That a threat? That's a warning from someone who's lived here long enough to know how things work. Elias met his eyes, saw calculation there, saw a man trying to decide how big a problem he was facing and whether violence would solve it. Appreciate the warning, Elias said. I'll give you one too. Whatever you're hiding, it's going to come out. The only question is whether you're on the right side when it does. He left before Garrett could respond, aware of eyes boring into his back. Outside, the morning sun felt too bright. His legs still ached from last night's run through the mine, and the weight of what he was trying to do pressed heavier with each conversation. He'd rattled cages, made people nervous, but nervous people were also dangerous people, and he was alone in a town that didn't want him here. Sarah was waiting at the edge of town when he found her, standing near where Emily had disappeared. Her face told him she'd learned something. The families talked, she said without preamble. Emily's mother said her daughter mentioned feeling watched, someone following her the last few days before she vanished. She told her mother it was probably nothing. Did she say who? No, just that she felt eyes on her. Jane's brother said the same thing. Jane mentioned a man hanging around the hotel, asking questions, making her uncomfortable. Description? Tall, dark hair. That's all they remembered. It wasn't much, but it was something. And Rebecca? Her mother said Rebecca was excited about the teaching job, had already started planning lessons. The day she disappeared, she was supposed to meet with someone about renting a room closer to the school. Sarah paused. The meeting was arranged by Mr. Garrett. That landed heavy. Garrett arranged the meeting? That's what her mother said. Rebecca mentioned it the night before. Said Mr. Garrett had found someone who had a room available, gave her the address. What address? Sarah pulled out a piece of paper. This one. Rebecca's mother wrote it down. Elias looked at the address. West side of town, near the mines. We need to check this, he said. I already did. There's no house there, just empty land and forest. Which meant Garrett had sent Rebecca to meet someone in a place where nobody would see or hear what happened. He's involved, Elias said. Maybe not directly, but he's part of it. Setting up the meetings, providing the women. Providing them to who? That's what we need to find out. He thought about the voices in the mine, about Dawson's refusal to investigate, about a town that looked the other way while young women disappeared. This is bigger than one man. It's organized, multiple people working together. A conspiracy, or just people protecting their interests, money, power, secrets, same things people always kill for. Sarah looked shaken. What do? We go back to that mine tonight, see what's really there. They'll be watching for you. Probably. Which is why we go prepared. He checked the sun, still hours until dark. Get whatever supplies you can without drawing attention. Rope, lanterns, matches. I'll scout the approach, find a way in they won't expect. And if we find something, then we get out fast and ride straight to the nearest territorial marshal. Skip Dawson entirely. She nodded, but he could see the fear underneath. This was real now. Not just asking questions, but walking into the teeth of whatever darkness had swallowed 3 women. You don't have to come, he said. Can do this alone. No, you can't. You don't know the area well enough. And besides, she straightened. They were my students, my responsibility. I'm seeing this through. Stubborn. Margaret would have definitely liked her. They split up again. Sarah headed to the general store while Elias circled wide around town, studying approaches to the western forest. The main trail was too obvious, but there were game paths, deer trails, ways through the woods that didn't announce themselves. He found one that looked promising, narrow, overgrown, but it led in the right direction. Followed it for a quarter-mile to make sure it stayed useful, then doubled back. By late afternoon, he was checking his gear. Winchester cleaned and loaded. Colt the same. Extra ammunition distributed between pockets. The piece of fabric tucked away as evidence. He thought about writing a letter, something to send back to Coleman if things went wrong. But what would it say? That he'd ridden into another man's trouble and gotten himself killed for it. That seemed about right, but also pointless. Coleman would figure it out when Elias didn't come back. Instead, he sat on the bed and thought about Margaret. About the morning he'd buried her and sworn he was done caring about anything except the land. About how that promise had lasted exactly as long as it took for someone to need help he could provide. She'd probably laugh at that too, call him a fool and mean it affectionately. Getting too old for this, he said to the empty room. Should have stayed home, fixed that fence, lived quiet. But quiet was just another word for hiding, and he'd hidden long enough. Sarah knocked at 6. She had a canvas bag filled with supplies, rope, 3 lanterns, oil, matches, a small hand shovel for reasons he didn't question. Got everything? He asked. I think so. Also got us some food for after, assuming there is an after. Dark humor. Good sign. Meant she wasn't giving in to fear. They ate in his room, bread, cheese, jerky. Neither talked much. What was there to say? They were about to walk into a mine that might contain evidence of murder, guarded by people who'd already shown willingness to shoot trespassers. Odds weren't great, but odds never were when something important needed doing. Full dark came around 8. They waited another hour to let the town settle, then slipped out the back of the hotel. The streets were quiet. A few lights in windows, voices from the saloon, but mostly just the sound of wind through buildings that had seen better days. They reached the forest edge without incident. Elias led the way, following the game trail he'd scouted. Sarah stayed close behind, moving quietly for someone who spent her days teaching children. The woods felt different at night. Darker, closer, full of sounds that probably meant nothing but could mean everything. Every snapped twig sounded like a gunshot. Every rustle suggested movement. Elias kept his breathing steady, one hand on the Winchester, the other occasionally touching trees for guidance. The trail twisted through dense undergrowth, around deadfalls and boulders. After 30 minutes, he stopped, listened. Nothing obvious. But the forest felt watched. Problem? Sarah whispered. Don't know yet. Stay alert. They continued. The mine entrance wasn't far now, maybe another quarter-mile through the trees. Then Elias heard it. Voices. Faint but clear. He held up a hand. Sarah froze. The voices came from ahead and to the left. Multiple men moving through the forest. Check the perimeter. Saw something earlier. Probably just deer. Guards, patrolling. Elias gestured for Sarah to get low. They crouched behind a fallen tree, barely breathing. 2 men passed within 20 feet, both carrying rifles. They looked bored but alert enough to be dangerous. After they passed, Elias waited 5 full minutes before moving again. Led Sarah in a wide circle around where the guards had been, approaching the mine from a different angle. The entrance appeared through the trees, same collapsed timber, same narrow opening. But now there was light inside, lanterns, and voices. They got as close as they dared, maybe 30 yards out, concealed behind rocks and underbrush. Through the opening, Elias could see movement, shadows against lantern light. At least 3 people inside, maybe more. He strained to hear conversation. Another shipment next week. Garrett's getting cold feet. Tell him to calm down or we'll find someone else. What about those 2? The shooter and the teacher? Dawson says he warned them. They leave tomorrow or we handle it. Sarah's hand gripped Elias's arm. She'd heard it too. The merchandise is ready. Just need to move it before anyone asks more questions. Merchandise. They were talking about people like cargo. Elias felt cold rage building. These weren't just killers, they were traffickers, taking young women and selling them like cattle. He needed to see more, needed proof that would hold up. Carefully, inch by inch, he moved closer to the entrance. Sarah grabbed his arm harder, shook her head. Too risky. He knew she was right, but being right didn't help the women who were already gone or the ones who might be next. He kept moving, got to within 15 feet, could see inside now. The chamber was larger than he'd thought. Timber shored, reinforced. Not an abandoned mine, but an active operation. Crates stacked along one wall, a table with maps and papers. And 3 men standing around discussing business like this was normal. One of them he recognized, the tall man from behind the hotel desk. One of Garrett's employees. The other 2 were strangers. Hard-looking men. The kind who did violence for money and slept fine afterward. Elias was trying to see what was in the crates when one of the men turned toward the entrance, looked right at where Elias was hiding. Froze. Someone's out there. Everything happened fast. The men grabbed their rifles, started moving toward the entrance. Elias scrambled backward, grabbed Sarah, pulled her away from the mine. "Run!" he hissed. They ran. Behind them, shouts. Lantern light spilling from the mine. Then gunshots. Wild, undirected, but close enough to make trees splinter. Elias and Sarah crashed through the forest, abandoning stealth for speed. Branches whipped at their faces. Roots tried to trip them. More shots. Closer now. "This way!" Sarah gasped, pulling him left. They burst onto a different trail, wider, more open, dangerous but faster. Heavy footsteps pounded behind them, at least 3 men, maybe more. "Stop! We just want to talk!" Like hell they did. Elias spun, fired the Winchester twice back down the trail. Didn't aim to hit, just to make them hesitate. It worked. The pursuit slowed. He and Sarah kept running. His leg was screaming, breath coming in ragged gasps. Too old for this. Way too old. Sarah stumbled. He caught her, kept her upright, kept moving. The trail opened into a clearing. Moonlight showed the town ahead. Lights, buildings, relative safety. They burst from the forest running full out. Behind them, the pursuit stopped at the tree line. The men wouldn't follow into town. Too visible. Too many witnesses. But Elias heard one voice carry across the clearing. "You're dead. Both of you. You hear me? Dead!" They didn't stop running until they reached the hotel, crashed through the back entrance, up the stairs, into Elias's room. Sarah collapsed against the wall, breathing so hard she might pass out. Elias locked the door, checked the window, made sure nobody had followed all the way. For a long minute, neither spoke. Just breathed and tried to process what had almost happened. Finally, Sarah managed, "Did you see anything useful?" "Enough. It's a trafficking operation. They're taking the women somewhere, selling them." She looked like she might be sick. "Emily, Jane, Rebecca, they're not dead. They're somewhere else, being held or already sold or—" He didn't finish. The possibilities were all terrible. "We need to get help. Real help. The territorial marshal, the army, someone." "Agreed. But first we need to survive the night. Those men know where we are, and they just threatened to kill us." Sarah's eyes widened. "You think they'll come here? Would you risk leaving witnesses alive if you were them?" She moved to her bag, pulled out a small revolver Elias hadn't known she was carrying. "Then we wait, and if they come, we fight." He almost smiled. School teacher with a gun and enough spine to use it. Margaret definitely would have liked her. "Get some rest," he said. "I'll watch the door." "You need rest too." "I'll rest when we're out of this town." They argued about it briefly, then compromised. 2-hour shifts, both of them armed, nobody sleeping too deeply. Elias took first watch. Sat in the chair with the Winchester across his lap, watching the door and listening to the hotel settle around them. Downstairs he heard movement, voices, footsteps, then silence. The waiting was worse than the running. At least running gave you something to do besides think about all the ways this could end badly. He thought about the 3 women, about families who'd never see their daughters again, about a system so corrupt it could disappear people and nobody with power cared enough to stop it. That's what made him angriest. Not the criminals. Criminals existed everywhere, but the law that looked away. The sheriff who took money to ignore crimes. The hotel owner who set up meetings knowing what they meant. The ordinary evil of people choosing comfort over justice. His watch ended. Sarah took over, moving to the chair while he stretched out on the bed fully clothed, guns within reach. Sleep came fitfully, bringing dreams of mines and gunfire and voices promising death. He woke to Sarah shaking him. Someone's downstairs, multiple people, moving quiet. He was on his feet immediately, Winchester in hand. Checked the window, still dark outside, maybe 3 in the morning. Below, floorboards creaked. Whispered voices. The sound of someone testing doors. They were coming. Elias looked at Sarah, saw fear but also determination. "Window or door?" she whispered. "Window." Rope down to the alley. They moved fast. Sarah tied one end of the rope to the bed frame, threw the other end out the window. Elias went first, rifle slung over his back, using the rope to lower himself. Hit the alley, looked up. Sarah was already coming down, awkward but quick. Above them, their door crashed open. Shouts. Lantern light spilling from the window. Sarah dropped the last few feet. Elias caught her, steadied her. "Which way?" "Livery. Get the horses and ride." They ran through pre-dawn streets, hearing pursuit behind them. Boots on wood, angry voices calling for them to stop. The livery was locked. Elias shot the lock off, not caring about noise anymore. They burst inside, found their horses, started saddling in near darkness. Footsteps outside. Multiple men surrounding the building. "Come on out, there's nowhere to go." Elias finished Sarah's saddle, then his own, led both horses to the back of the livery where a wide delivery door faced the open land behind town. "When I open this, ride hard west," he said quietly. "Don't stop for anything." "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you. Now get ready." He threw the door open. Sarah kicked her horse into a gallop, bursting into the open. Gunfire erupted, muzzle flashes in the darkness. Elias fired the Winchester from horseback, 3 quick shots toward where the flashes came from, then spurred his own horse into motion. They thundered into the darkness, bullets whining past, the town falling away behind them. A mile out, they slowed enough to check if pursuit was following. Nothing yet. But dawn was coming, and with daylight, they'd be visible for miles. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked, horse dancing underneath her. "Nearest territorial marshal. We get him, bring him back with enough deputies to arrest everyone involved." "That's 2 days' ride." "Then we better not stop." They rode hard through the remainder of the night, putting distance between themselves and Thornton Ridge. Behind them, the sky began to lighten with dawn. They might not have seen if they'd waited any longer. Elias didn't look back, just focused on the trail ahead and the promise he'd made to 3 families who deserved answers. The traffickers had made a mistake letting him walk into their operation. Now they'd learned the cost of underestimating a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The horses were stumbling by the time they reached Copper Falls 2 days later. Elias and Sarah looked worse, covered in trail dust, exhausted to the bone, running on nothing but determination and bad coffee from the one stop they'd risked. The territorial marshal's office sat on the main street of a town 3 times the size of Thornton Ridge. Actual brick buildings. A bank that looked legitimate. People who walked like they expected tomorrow to arrive. Elias tied up the horses, helped Sarah down. She'd barely spoken the last 10 miles, saving energy for what came next. Inside, a deputy looked up from his desk. Young guy, clean uniform, the kind who probably thought law work was mostly paperwork. "Help you? Need to see the marshal. It's urgent." "Marshal Cutler's in court. Won't be back till this afternoon." "How long?" The deputy checked a clock on the wall. 2, maybe 3 hours. Elias wanted to argue, push, demand immediate action. But he'd learned long ago that exhausted people made mistakes, and they needed to get this right. "We'll wait," he said. They found a bench outside the office. Sarah slumped against the wall, eyes closing almost immediately. Elias stayed awake through sheer stubbornness, watching the street, expecting at any moment to see Dawson or Garrett's men riding in. An hour passed. Then 2. Finally, a man emerged from the courthouse across the street. Tall, gray-haired, wearing a badge that looked like it had seen actual use. He walked with the careful gait of someone whose back had taken too many hits over the years. "That's him," the deputy said, appearing in the doorway. "Marshal Cutler." Elias stood, touched Sarah's shoulder. She jerked awake, disoriented for a moment before memory caught up. They intercepted Cutler halfway to his office. "Marshal, we need to talk. It's about missing women in Thornton Ridge. Cutler stopped, studied them both with eyes that had seen enough lies to recognize truth when it presented itself bloody and desperate. Inside, he said. His office was organized chaos, files stacked everywhere, maps on the walls, the smell of old tobacco. He gestured them to chairs settled behind his desk and waited. Elias told it straight. The 3 disappearances, Sheriff Dawson's refusal to investigate, the mine, the traffickers, the chase through the forest, and the men who'd tried to kill them. Sarah added details. The families, the torn fabric, Garrett's role setting up the last meeting. When they finished, Cutler sat in silence for a long moment. "You have proof?" he asked finally. Elias produced the scrap of fabric. Rebecca Cross's dress, found in a mine that's supposed to be abandoned but has fresh activity, supplies, men with guns. That's not proof of trafficking. Could be anything. Could be. But 3 women disappearing from the same town in 6 weeks? A sheriff who won't investigate? A hotel owner who arranged a meeting that led to a disappearance? Add it up. Cutler leaned back. "I know Tom Dawson. Worked with him years ago. He's lazy, maybe corrupt, but I never figured him for something like this." "Maybe he's not running it," Sarah said. "Maybe he's just looking the other way for money. That's still complicit." Cutler stood, walked to a map on the wall, found Thornton Ridge, studied it. "You understand what you're asking. I'd need to deputize a posse, ride 80 miles, confront a local sheriff, and arrest him based on circumstantial evidence from 2 people I just met." "I understand it's difficult," Elias said. "But those women are somewhere, either still alive and being held or sold already and moved. Every day we wait makes them harder to find. And if we go in and find nothing, if this mine is just a mine and Dawson's just lazy, I'll have created a jurisdictional nightmare and probably ended my career." "Then don't trust us. Come see for yourself. Ride to Thornton Ridge. Look at the evidence. Talk to the families. Make your own judgment." Cutler turned from the map. "You're asking me to believe a farmer-turned-deputy and a school teacher stumbled onto a trafficking ring that local law is protecting. I'm asking you to do your job," Elias said quietly. "Same as I tried to do mine." Their eyes met. Something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. The understanding of men who'd both spent years trying to hold up standards in places that wanted to let them fall. "Wait here," Cutler said. He left the office. They heard him in the outer room, talking to deputies, his voice low and urgent. Sarah leaned close to Elias. "You think he'll help?" "Don't know, but we gave him everything we have. Rest is up to him." 20 minutes later, Cutler returned with 3 other men, all wearing deputy badges, all looking serious. "We ride in 2 hours," he said. "I'm bringing 6 deputies total, enough to handle resistance if it comes to that. You 2 will guide us to the mine and identify the people involved." Relief flooded through Elias, so strong he almost sagged. "Thank you," Sarah said. "Don't thank me yet. We still have to find something." Cutler pulled out a fresh map, spread it on his desk. "Show me exactly where this mine is." The next 2 hours blurred together, planning routes, gathering supplies, Cutler sending telegrams to notify other territorial offices that he was pursuing a potential trafficking case. Official procedures that Elias had neither the patience nor the authority to handle. He and Sarah got fresh horses, ate their first real meal in 2 days, and tried not to think about all the ways this could still go wrong. By late afternoon, they rode out, 9 people total, armed and grim-faced. The journey back felt different. Not running this time, not hiding, just steady forward motion with the weight of law behind them. They camped one night, guards posted, nobody talking much. The deputies were professional, experienced. They knew what they were riding toward. Thornton Ridge appeared on the second day just before noon. Cutler stopped the group a mile out, surveyed the town through field glasses. "Quiet," he observed. "Usually is," Sarah said. "Small population, not much happens. Until recently." "All right, here's how we do this. 4 deputies stay with me. We go talk to Sheriff Dawson. The rest of you take Varnes and Miss Brennan to this mine, assess the situation. Nobody shoots unless shot at. We do this legal and proper." One of the deputies, older man named Warren, nodded. "And if Dawson resists, then we arrest him and sort it out later." Cutler checked his weapons. "Let's move." They split up. Cutler's group rode into town openly, making no attempt at stealth. Elias led the other group around the outskirts, approaching the mine from the west. The forest looked different in daylight, less threatening, more mundane. Just trees and underbrush and the normal sounds of afternoon. They found the mine entrance exactly where Elias remembered. The debris had been moved again. Someone had been back since the chase. Warren signaled his deputies to fan out. They approached carefully, weapons ready. The entrance was dark, silent. "Anyone inside?" Warren called. No answer. They lit lanterns, moved in cautiously. The tunnel stretched back just as Elias remembered, but when they reached the chamber where he'd seen the men and supplies, it was empty. Completely empty. No crates, no table, no maps or papers, just bare rock and old timbers. Warren looked at Elias. "You sure this is the right place?" "Positive. There were supplies here. Men. They must have cleared it out after we escaped." They searched thoroughly, found nothing except some scuff marks where crates might have sat and a few boot prints in the dirt. "There's another chamber," Elias said, remembering. "Deeper in. I didn't get there last time, but the tunnel continues." They followed it back, squeezing through a narrow passage that opened into a second chamber. This one wasn't empty. 4 women sat huddled against the far wall, chained to iron rings bolted into the rock. They looked terrified when the lantern light hit them. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Sarah pushed past the deputies, ran to them. "Emily? Emily Parker?" One of the women looked up, eyes hollow with fear and exhaustion. "Miss Brennan?" Sarah was crying now, kneeling beside her, checking the chains. "It's okay. We found you. You're safe now." Warren was already moving, examining the chains. "We need a blacksmith. These are solid iron, can't break them without tools." Elias studied the other 3 women. Not Jane or Rebecca. Strangers. Younger, maybe 16 or 17. They stared at him with the kind of fear that comes from expecting the worst and getting it repeatedly. "How many others?" he asked gently. Emily spoke, voice cracked from disuse. "They took Jane and Rebecca 4 days ago, said they had buyers waiting. We were supposed to go next." Sarah's face crumpled. "Where? Where did they take them?" "I don't know. They never said. Just west. Always west." Warren was giving orders to his deputies. "Get these chains off, carefully, then get them water, food, blankets. And someone ride back to town, tell Marshal Cutler what we found." One deputy rode out immediately. The others worked on the chains while Elias and Sarah stayed with the women, telling them it was over, they were safe. Help was here. It took an hour to break the chains and get the women mobile. They could barely walk. Weeks in darkness had weakened them. The deputies had to practically carry them out. Emerging into daylight, Emily shielded her eyes, blinking against the brightness. The other 3 clung to each other, crying and shaking. Sarah stayed close, talking quietly, offering comfort Elias couldn't provide. He'd found them, but he didn't know how to fix what had been done. They were halfway back to town when they heard gunfire. Short burst, then silence. Then another burst. "That's from town," Warren said. "Move." They pushed the pace as much as the injured women could handle. Reached the edge of Thornton Ridge to find chaos. Cutler and his deputies had Dawson and 3 other men pinned down behind the sheriff's office, trading shots. Townspeople were either hiding or watching from windows. Warren deployed his deputies quickly. "Flank them, cut off escape. No one shoots unless they shoot first." Elias left Sarah with the rescued women and moved forward, Winchester ready. He found Cutler behind a water trough, reloading. "Situation?" Elias asked. "Dawson pulled a gun when we tried to arrest him. His men backed him up. We've been stuck here for 20 minutes. He glanced at Elias. "You find anything?" 4 women, chained in the mine. Emily Parker's one of them. Cutler's expression hardened. "Then we end this. Now." He stood, raised his voice to Carrie. "Dawson, you're surrounded. Throw out your weapons and surrender." "Go to hell, Cutler. We found the women. It's over. Don't make this worse." A long pause, then, "You can't prove anything." "We can prove you shot at territorial marshals. That alone gets you hanged. Add trafficking and you're done." More silence. Elias could almost hear Dawson thinking, calculating, realizing he was out of options. Then one of Dawson's men broke, threw his gun out, walked into the open with hands raised. "Don't shoot! I surrender! This wasn't my idea!" The others followed quickly, 2 more deputies, both looking scared and defeated, but not Dawson. "Tom!" Cutler called. "You're alone now. Come out!" No response. Elias moved carefully, circling around the sheriff's office. Saw a back door slightly ajar. Dawson was running. Elias slipped through the door, moved quietly through the office. Found Dawson at the front, peering out the window, gun in hand. "It's done," Elias said quietly. Dawson spun, brought the gun up. Elias was faster. The Winchester cracked once. Dawson's gun flew from his hand, same trick that had worked on the bank robbers. The sheriff stared at his empty hand, then at Elias. "How do you keep doing that?" he asked, almost curious. "Practice. Now get outside before I shoot something more permanent." Dawson walked out with hands raised. Cutler arrested him immediately, along with his 3 deputies. The townspeople emerged slowly, confused and frightened. Sarah appeared with the 4 women, and when people saw Emily Parker alive, gasps rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Parker pushed through, saw her daughter, and collapsed crying. Emily stumbled into her mother's arms, both of them holding each other like drowning people clutching life. Cutler addressed the crowd. "I'm Marshal Cutler, Territorial Authority. We have evidence of a trafficking operation running out of this town. Sheriff Dawson is under arrest. I need anyone with information about this operation to come forward now." Silence at first. Then slowly, people started talking. Someone had seen supply wagons heading west at night. Someone else had heard rumors but been too afraid to ask questions. The clerk from the hotel, Thomas, stepped forward, shaking but determined. "Mr. Garrett ran it," he said. He'd find the women, set up meetings, hand them over to men who came through every few weeks. Sheriff Dawson got paid to ignore it. "Where's Garrett now?" Cutler demanded. "Ran when he heard you were coming. Took a horse and headed west 2 hours ago." Warren was already mounting. "I'll track him." "Take 2 men," Cutler ordered. "Bring him back alive if possible." They rode out fast. The rest of the day passed in statements, arrests, and reunions. Emily's family held her like they'd never let go. The other 3 women had no family in town, but Sarah and some of the town's women took them in, got them clean clothes and food and quiet places to recover. Elias stood apart from it all, watching. This was the part he'd never been good at, the aftermath. He knew how to find people and stop bad men, but the healing part, the helping people put pieces back together, that was beyond him. Sarah found him near sunset, sitting on the steps of the hotel. "Emily told me what happened," she said quietly. "How they were taken, what was done. She couldn't finish. "I know. She also said you saved her life. That if we hadn't come when we did, they'd have been moved tomorrow. It was just timing. It was more than that. It was someone caring enough to act." She sat beside him. "The other 2, Jane and Rebecca, Emily thinks they're somewhere west of here. A ranch or compound where the buyers take them before moving them further." Elias felt his jaw tighten. "How far west?" "She doesn't know, just that it was 2 days by wagon." He stood. "Need to tell Cutler." They found the marshal organizing his prisoners for transport. When Elias explained what Emily had said, Cutler looked pained. "That could be anywhere in a 100-mile radius. We don't have the manpower to search that much territory." "Then I'll search it myself. Varnes, those women are still out there, still being held. I'm not stopping until they're found." Cutler studied him for a long moment. "You understand the odds? They could have been moved already. Could be in a different territory, could be dead. Could be alive and waiting for someone to give a damn. That's not fair. I give a damn, but I've got resources, jurisdictions, procedures. I know, and while you're sorting all that out, they're suffering." Elias kept his voice level. "I'm not criticizing, just stating what I'm going to do." Sarah stepped forward. "I'm going with him." "No," Elias said immediately. "Yes. You'll need someone who knows the area, and someone to help if you find them." They stared at each other. Elias wanted to argue, but saw the same stubborn determination that had brought her 80 miles to Red Hollow, asking for help. Cutler raised his hands. "I can't officially sanction this, but I can't stop private citizens from traveling either." He pulled out a map. "There are 3 large ranches west of here. Any of them could have outbuildings or compounds. I'd start there." He marked locations. Elias committed them to memory. "If you find anything," Cutler continued, "you come get me. You don't try to handle it alone. Understood?" "Understood." That night, Elias prepared for another journey, cleaned his guns, checked supplies, Tried not to think about how tired he was or how much his legs still hurt from the mine. Sarah appeared at his door with coffee and bread. Thought you might need this. They sat together, not talking much. Outside, Thornton Ridge was settling into uneasy peace. Dawson and his men were locked in the town cells awaiting transport. Garrett was still missing, but Warren would find him eventually. And somewhere west, two women waited in darkness, hoping someone would come. "Why do you do this, Isis?" Sarah asked eventually. "Do what?" "Keep going when most people would quit. You could have walked away and read Hollow. Could have left Thornton Ridge after that first conversation with Dawson. Could stop now and let the marshal handle the rest." Elias thought about Margaret, about the grave he visited every morning, about 12 years of silence and routine, and trying to forget that caring about things hurt. "Because somebody has to," he said finally, "and because I've spent too long not doing anything that mattered." "You think this matters?" "I think 3 families got daughters back who might never have come home otherwise." "Yeah, that matters." She smiled, small, sad, but genuine. "You're a better man than you think you are. Don't know about that. Just know I can't live with myself if I don't try." They rode out at dawn, just the two of them this time. Cutler had wanted to send deputies, but Elias refused. Too many people made too much noise, and speed mattered more than numbers. The first ranch was a bust, legitimate cattle operation, owner cooperative, no sign of anything suspicious. The second took longer to reach, bigger spread, multiple buildings. They approached carefully, watching from a distance first. Something felt wrong. Too quiet. Too few people visible for a ranch this size. They waited until dark, then moved closer. Found the compound at the far edge of the property, 3 buildings surrounded by a fence, guards posted. "That's not a ranch operation," Sarah whispered. "No, it's not." They circled wide, looking for weaknesses. Found a section where the fence backed against dense brush, harder to guard. "We need help," Sarah said. "We should get Cutler. That's 2 days round trip. Whatever's happening in there could be done by then." "So what do you want to do?" Elias looked at the compound, counting guards, assessing angles. Old habits from bounty work, from tracking dangerous men through dangerous places. "I want to know if they're in there, if Jane and Rebecca are inside those buildings. And if they are, then we get them out." "That's crazy. There are at least 6 guards, just 2 of us." "I've faced worse odds." "When?" Good question. He couldn't actually remember worse odds, but backing down wasn't an option. "Stay here," he said. "Keep watch. If I'm not back in an hour, ride for Cutler." Elias? He was already moving. Slipped through the fence, stayed low, used every shadow, got close enough to one building to hear voices inside. Male voices, rough talk, laughter. Then a woman screaming. Everything in Elias went cold and focused. He moved to the window, risked a glance inside. Saw them, Jane and Rebecca, along with 4 other women he didn't recognize. All chained, all terrified. 3 men stood over them, one holding a whip. Elias had seen enough. He circled back to Sarah. "They're in there, six women total, 3 guards inside, at least 3 more outside." "Then we ride for help." "No time. They're being hurt. Now." Sarah grabbed his arm. "You can't save them alone. You'll get yourself killed and then they'll still be trapped." She was right. He knew she was right. But the screaming continued, carrying across the night air. "I can create a distraction," he said. "Pull the guards away. You slip in, free the women, get them out while they're dealing with me." "That's not a plan. That's suicide." "You have a better idea?" She didn't. They sat in tense silence, listening to suffering neither could ignore, knowing that doing the smart thing meant letting it continue. Finally, Sarah said, "There's an old mining technique. When one tunnel is blocked, you blast another." "Meaning?" "Meaning we don't fight them head on. We make them come to us." She pointed to the buildings. "That's all wood construction, and I've got matches." Elias understood. "Fire. Draw them out, chaos in the dark. We grab the women in the confusion." "It's risky." "Everything about this is risky." They spent 20 minutes preparing, finding positions, planning routes, making sure they both knew what to do when things went wrong. Because things would definitely go wrong. Sarah crept to the far side of the compound with oil from one of the lanterns. Elias positioned himself near the main entrance, Winchester ready. He saw Sarah's signal, a brief flash of light, then smoke, then flames. The fire caught fast, spreading across the roof of one building. Shouts erupted. Men ran from all directions trying to control the blaze. Elias moved in the chaos, slipped through the fence, reached the building where the women were held. The door was locked. He shot the lock off, kicked it open. Inside, the 3 guards spun toward him. He fired 3 times, 2 shots hitting walls near their heads, 1 hitting a lantern and plunging the room into darkness. "Move!" he shouted to the women. They scrambled towards him, chains clanking. He used a fallen guard's keys to unlock them quickly. No time for careful work, just speed and desperation. Outside, the fire was spreading. Guards were shouting, confused, disorganized. Sarah appeared with the horses. "This way!" They ran, Elias, Sarah, and 6 women stumbling through smoke and darkness. Gunfire erupted behind them. Someone had figured it out. Bullets whined past. Elias turned, fired back, giving the women time to reach the fence. They pushed through, hit the brush, kept running. A guard appeared ahead of them. Sarah shot him, clean shot to the shoulder that dropped him without killing. Then they were clear, mounting horses, pulling women up behind them, riding hard into the night. The compound fell away behind them, flames lighting the sky. They rode for an hour before stopping to check everyone. 6 women, all present, all alive. Jane Whitmore was crying. Rebecca Cross looked shell-shocked. The others just clung to each other. "You're safe," Sarah kept saying. "You're safe now." By morning, they'd reached Cutler's jurisdiction. The marshal met them with his full force. 8 deputies, all armed, all ready. When he saw the women, his expression shifted from anger at their recklessness to something like awe. "You actually did it," he said. "They needed help," Elias replied simply. Cutler organized everything: medical care for the women, a raid on the compound with proper authority, statements, and evidence collection. Warren brought in Garrett 3 days later, found hiding in a cabin 50 miles west. The trials took months. Dawson got 20 years. Garrett got 30. The guards from the compound got various sentences. The trafficking network, which extended into 3 territories, got dismantled piece by piece. By the time it was all finished, winter had arrived. Elias stood outside the courthouse in Copper Falls, watching snowfall, feeling older than his years and more tired than seemed possible. Sarah emerged from inside, wrapped in a coat borrowed from one of the rescued women's families. "It's done," she said. "All of them convicted. The judge said it was the most comprehensive trafficking case he'd seen." "Good." "He also said you and I should receive commendations for our work." "Don't need commendations." "I know, but you earned them anyway." She paused. "What will you do now?" Elias thought about Red Hollow, about his cabin and Margaret's grave, and the life he'd left behind when he rode west chasing trouble that wasn't his. Except it had been his. The moment he'd heard about those missing women, it became his. "Going home," he said. "Got a fence to fix, land to tend." "Will you keep the deputy job?" "Don't know. Coleman probably fired me for abandoning my post. Or he'll understand you were doing what needed doing, maybe." "Probably not." But it didn't matter much either way. Sarah stepped closer. "Emily wants to see you before you leave. All of them do. They want to say thank you." "Don't need thanks." "Maybe they need to give it." He met her eyes, saw strength there that had carried her 80 miles looking for help and then into fire and gunshots to save people she barely knew. "You did good work," he said. "Those women are alive because you didn't quit. We both did good work. And those women are alive because you saw them as people worth saving, not just problems to ignore." She smiled. "That matters more than you know." They stood together in the falling snow, 2 people who'd stumbled into something bigger than themselves and somehow come through the other side. The rescued women wanted to thank him, but Elias kept it brief. Accepted their gratitude, told them to rebuild their lives, and quietly slipped away before it got emotional. He rode out alone the next morning, leaving Sarah to help with the remaining aftermath. She had offers now, teaching positions in bigger towns, recognition for her work. She'd be fine. The journey back to Red Hollow took a week. When the cabin finally appeared through the trees, Elias felt something loosen in his chest. Home. He unsaddled Keeper, checked the animals. Jensen's boy had done good work keeping everything fed. The cabin was exactly as he'd left it. He made coffee, carried 2 cups out to Margaret's grave. I'm back, he said to the wooden cross. Got complicated out there, but it's done now. The winter wind whispered through bare branches, helped some people, saved some lives. Don't know if it changes anything, but it felt right doing it. He drank his coffee slowly, watching the sun set over land he'd worked for 12 years. Tomorrow he'd fix the fence, check the repairs needed for winter, fall back into the routine that had sustained him through grief and isolation. But something was different now. He'd spent 12 years invisible, and in becoming visible had discovered that mattering to others gave life shape that routine never could. The badge sat in his pocket. He'd kept it, despite everything. Maybe he'd wear it again. Maybe not. But the choice was his now, made with full understanding of what it meant. A week later, Coleman showed up at the cabin unannounced. Heard you were back, the sheriff said, dismounting. Also heard you stopped a trafficking ring, rescued 9 women, and burned down a compound. News travels. Marshal Cutler sent a full report, said you did work that should have been handled by 20 deputies. Coleman looked at him. Also said you went rogue, ignored jurisdiction, and damn near got yourself killed multiple times. Sounds about right. So the question is, do I fire you for abandoning your post, or promote you for doing the job better than anyone expected? Elias thought about that. What do you want to do? I want you to keep the badge. Red Hollow needs someone who doesn't run when things get hard. He paused. But I need to know you'll actually be here when I need you. Can't promise that. If someone needs help and I can give it, I'll go. Even if it's not your jurisdiction? Especially then. The people who need help most are usually the ones nobody with jurisdiction cares about. Coleman smiled. Fair answer. He extended his hand. Keep the badge, deputy. Just try not to start any more wars while you're at it. They shook on it. After Coleman left, Elias sat on his porch watching the land settle into winter sleep. The work never ended. Fences always needed fixing, animals always needed tending, and somewhere out there, someone always needed help. He'd spent 12 years trying to disappear into routine, thinking that if he just kept his head down and worked the land, the pain of loss would eventually fade. It hadn't faded. Probably never would. But he'd learned something more important. Pain didn't have to mean paralysis. Grief didn't require isolation. And a man who'd lost everything still had something left to give. The quiet widower who bought flour twice a month and spoke 3 words at most was gone, replaced by someone who'd discovered that being seen came with responsibility, but also with purpose. 9 women were alive because he'd chosen to act instead of hide. That was enough. More than enough. As darkness fell, Elias went inside, cleaned his guns one last time, and hung the Winchester above the fireplace where it belonged. Tomorrow he'd ride into Red Hollow, do his job, and live the life Margaret would have wanted him to live. Not buried in the past, but moving forward with whatever strength remained. The frontier was hard and unforgiving, but it also needed people who stood up when others stepped back. And Elias Varnes, the man nobody had noticed for 12 years, had finally become someone worth noticing. Not because he was perfect or heroic or special, but because when it mattered most, he'd simply refused to look away.